The Spotlight, shining a light on podcasts and videos that have caught our attention.
Hi, and welcome to The Spotlight. I'm Jen Spiker, and today I have something special to share with you. The Sydney Prayer Breakfast is an annual prayer gathering of Christians from all denominations who work or live in the Sydney CBD. Speakers at previous breakfasts have included leaders in business and politics, such as the recently retired Governor-General David Hurley and former Reserve Bank Governor Glenn Stevens. Dr. Andrew Browning was invited to be the keynote speaker for the 2024 Sydney Prayer Breakfast. Andrew shared his journey as an Australian-trained obstetrician and gynaecologist turned Christian missionary.
The Spotlight with Jen Spiker.
Thanks very much for inviting me to speak to you this morning, and thanks for your kind introduction, Anna. My remit this morning was a personal testimony about prayer, which is I found really difficult to talk about. I mean, I've been a volunteer in Africa at various times, working with a mission, working with a charity, working for the church, and we're building hospitals. My wife was building schools. We've seen some extraordinary answers to prayer. And as we were missionaries and volunteers there, we didn't have an income. We had to live by faith, which means that we were provided by God quite miraculously, always miraculously at times. I mean, we never knew where our funds were going to come from, but I learned that God supplies all our needs. Perhaps not our wants, but He certainly supplies our needs. So given the thought that I was living in difficult areas of the world and still work in difficult areas of the world, living by faith without an income, serving the Lord, you'd think I'd have a wonderful prayer life to give testimony to. I'd love to be able to say that I'm up at 5 o'clock every morning, praying for an hour, reading my Bible, singing hymns, skipping through the day, having visions of angels, but nothing could be further from the truth. I really, really struggle with my prayer life. I mean, sometimes I'm in situations abroad which is so desperate and so difficult, all I can do, I can't even put words together, I just sigh. And I joined David in Psalm 5 when David says to the Lord, "Consider my sigh." I was with a friend having lunch the other day talking about prayer life, and he admitted that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because he's in the audience, that his prayer life, listening to his prayer life must be to God listening to someone invent language. And I think that's much the same for me as well. But I've learnt a lot of things through prayer. The cornerstone of my Christian life is reading the Bible. Prayers go up and God's word comes down. God speaks to you through his word. And I was actually asked in an interview recently that I got my job in Ethiopia as a fistula surgeon. I came back to Australia to study theology, and they said, why on earth did you do that? To prepare to be a surgeon, why did you study theology? And the answer is quite simple. I mean, you can study my Dewhurst textbooks of gynaecology all I like, but that in there doesn't give you any comfort, doesn't give you any strength, doesn't give you any answers to the how, the why, and the method of living your life. So, dwelling on God's word, I don't dwell on Dewhurst's gynaecology in the morning, I can tell you that, but I dwell on God's word, and my prayers go up. And thankfully we have a God that Jesus that intercedes for us, and a God that listens and engages and walks with us. So I'm going to share 4 lessons I've learnt to you from my prayer life this morning. My preaching mentors would say only share 3 points. But you've had a good breakfast, you've had a coffee, I'm going to share with you 4 points this morning. So a point about what I've learned about myself through my prayer life, what I've learned about God, just one thing, if I told you everything we'd be here all day, and then 2 valuable lessons I've learned from my prayer life. The first thing about what I've learned about myself, my wife and I were recently married. We moved to northern Ethiopia, a town called Bahadar. We had a 4-month-old baby, so we were new parents, going up to what was then a semi-rural town in northern Ethiopia. My wife had trusted me to go up and find a house to live in as we moved up from Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia. And she had one request, and that I found a house of water. So I found a house that had a tap-in, which was a selling point for houses at that time in northern Ethiopia. And we moved there, but I didn't actually check if it had water in the tap. And we had a water tank, and my wife had a few things to say about that. But we had a water tank, and it would fill up maybe twice a week, 2,000 litres, and that was, the water for the week. But in the system wasn't working somewhere, and we couldn't work out what was going on. So we had 6 months, essentially, with no water, with a newborn baby. And you can live without electricity very happily. Most of the people in the world throughout history have lived very happy lives without electricity, but no one lives without water. If you want to brush your teeth, you can't because you've got no water. If you want to cook, you can't, you've got no water. If your 4-month baby has made a mess, and missionary babies do make a mess, when they finish their morning prayers they make a mess, they've got no water to clean them up. So we prayed and prayed quite desperately for a solution for the problem. And after 6 months of essentially living without water, fixing water with buckets every day, we got the problem fixed, and we had water in the house. And I've never felt so euphoric. I gave thanks to God that our problem was fixed. We had water in the house most days of the week, and I thought nothing would ever bother me again. But I can tell you, within a week, I was thinking, gosh, I wouldn't mind electricity in this house. And then a week later, I wouldn't mind a car. And a week later, something else. And I realised the problem was not with my prayers, is not with God. The problem was with me. And God spoke to me through his word, because God's word in Hebrews, it says, is sharper than any double-edged sword. It cuts through to divide your soul and spirit, and it judges the thoughts of your heart. And God taught me through, there's a great verse in Proverbs, Psalm 27 verse 10 says, death and destruction, they are never satisfied. Human desire is never satisfied. I wanted something, I got it, I wanted something else. I got it, I wanted something else. Human desire is never satisfied. But God in his word teaches us to be content. Be content in any circumstance, Paul says, and he can do that through Christ who strengthens him. And Paul says in Timothy, if you've got food and clothing, be content with that. And I've had my breakfast, I'm clothed this morning, so I'm feeling quite content. But a little bit nervous in front of you all, but content nonetheless. And it sets you free if you're being set free from those desires of wanting all the time, if you're content, it just sets you free to serve. And so I learnt in that first lesson to pray as Jesus taught me to pray, just to give me my daily bread. And he always does. Lesson number 2 is something that I learnt about God and how he perhaps answers or sometimes doesn't answer prayer. This time, a story from Sierra Leone. I was in Sierra Leone, I was operating on fistula patients, and I heard a commotion outside the door, and I was on my last operation of the day, so I went out, and the staff were resuscitating a lady, doing CPR. So I joined in to help resuscitate the lady and asked what happened, and they said, well, she was in clinic, which is just outside of theatres, and we called her name to come to clinic, but she didn't answer. So we went up to bring her up to the clinic and found that she was actually dead. She had died sitting, waiting for her clinic appointment. And you thought your waiting times were long in your hospitals here. But so we resuscitated her, and of course we prayed during that resuscitation. We resuscitated her with CPR for about 30 minutes, and we got a faint heart rate back and a few gasps of air. But she arrested again. We prayed, we kept on resuscitating. Another 20 minutes, we got a faint heart rate back, and we also got 1 or 2 gasps of air. By that time, we'd been resuscitating for an hour, which is far too long. We didn't know how long she had actually been dead before we started resuscitation. So even if she survived, which is incredibly unlikely, impossible, she'd had severe brain damage. So we prayed for her soul, and got her husband in, sat her next to her and said, look, she's on her last moments, we'll leave you together. I went to bed, got up the next morning because I was travelling back to Tanzania, to find that she was actually sitting up in bed, having breakfast and speaking with her husband in her right mind. It was an absolute miracle. And of course, we just gave thanks and praise to God for that miracle in that lady's life. It was an astounding answer to prayer. But a week later, I was back in Tanzania. I was doing an operation for a lady, young girl. She was about 19 or 20. She had a tumour. She was terrified before her operation. I don't blame her, with me as her surgeon. But she was reading her Bible. And so I sat with her on the hospital bed and we prayed with her, which she got great comfort from. She had a difficult operation, but it was routine. I saw her the next day and she was well. The next day, there's 2 days after, was a Sunday, so I was at church, but I got a phone call from the hospital saying that she'd got out of bed and fallen down dead. So I rushed in and helped with the resuscitation. But I was full of confidence from the week before. I thought, I know exactly what to pray. I know exactly how to feel. This girl will be raised again. We prayed, I prayed, in increasing desperation. We did CPR, and nothing. Just stony silence, and she died. I was devastated, of course. I carried her still warm body, just wrapped in a sheet, out to the Catholic sisters who were looking after her because she was an orphan, and lay her in the back of a cold ute. And I really wondered why God answered one prayer and saved that lady in Sierra Leone, but didn't save that lady in Tanzania. And it's difficult, and I still don't have obvious answers, but all we have to do is trust that the Lord of all the earth does what is right.
On the Spotlight, we've been listening to the first half of the keynote address from Dr. Andrew Browning at the 2024 Sydney Prayer Breakfast. We'll hear the balance of Andrew's insightful speech next time, but if you want to watch it in full now, you can by tapping the Watch tab in the Free Vision app. You'll find it in the Inspiring Messages feed. My name is Jen Spiker, and I look forward to joining you next time on The Spotlight as Dr. Andrew Browning shares what he learned from prayers that went unanswered.
For more great podcasts and videos like the one featured today, check out vision.org.au or the Free Vision app.